Meeting today. I'm Krista Ross, CEO at the Fredericton Chamber. I'd like to thank you for joining us today. We are recording this session, so we will be sharing it on social media afterwards, and you may want to do the same. Laura Oblinas is our speaker today. She's the founder and president and CEO and head person in charge of all things at Stiletto Consulting. And she has been working with a lot of companies developing recovery packages. A lot of those companies are in the manufacturing and IT sectors, but there's a lot of good information that would help any business regardless of the sector. She has started her business, was it in 2010, Laura?
2010, yep. 10 years first.
Laura started her business. The business has grown exponentially, and she has teammates that work for her business really across the country. So Laura's an engaging and informative speaker. She's also a good friend, and she's a past president of the Fredericton Chamber of Commerce. So we are very appreciative of her taking the time to prepare a presentation for us and to present it today. And I'm going to just note that I have to pop out of the call about 15 minutes before it completes. So Laura's going to moderate her own Q&A at the end. I will not get a chance to say thank you. So I'm going to say thank you up front, Laura, because I know you're going to do a great job. And thanks everybody for tuning in. Without any further ado, I'm going to mute my mic and turn it over to Laura.
Awesome. Thanks, Krista. So good morning, everybody, and thanks for taking the time to join us this morning. I know Krista and I were chatting a few weeks back, and I was sharing with her some of the things that we were doing for COVID recovery plans for communities and companies. And she said, hey, why don't you do a session for us so that you can kind of walk some folks through some tips or some things that you're learning. So what I'm going to share with you this morning is some industry analysis that we've been doing on various sectors and some of the impact with COVID. And I know you're hearing there's lots of information that's coming at you. It's a bit overwhelming. So we're trying to kind of simplify some of the things that we've identified and a few steps that you can take, and some of them you may already be taking. But just to really talk through and use this time to help identify some things that you've been kind of noodling on or that you're thinking about, so that we can try to identify things that you can take away from this and hopefully apply in your business. So I have the list of participants, which Tanya sent me, which is great. But before we dive in, I'd really love to hear from you for just like a quickie lightning round on why you want to participate in this discussion or what you're hoping to get out of it, so I can make sure I can tailor the conversation to that. Corinne, why don't we start with you? You're from the Learning Bar?
No, I'm from New Brunswick Association for Community Living.
Oh, shoot, wrong one. Oh, there you are. Yes, I'm just looking at the list. Yes, excellent. Okay.
Yeah. So I'm labor market facilitator with a national program that helps connect candidates with employers, and these candidates have either an intellectual or a developmental disability, which would be on the autism spectrum.
Okay.
So trying to figure out what the landscape is going to look like for employment opportunities, who's going to be hiring, who's not. That's my purpose of being here, is to try to figure out what employment landscape is going to look like.
Okay, awesome. Thank you. I think we have a couple things that might help with that. Jen, how about you? You're on mute.
Sorry. For me, it's just how I can help the team in general. I know everybody's kind of doing what their own thing right now, and everybody is kind of trying to field their own thing. Like Kathy is dealing with her stuff from her perspective, and Erin's dealing with her stuff from a sales perspective. So I was just looking at, is there anything that I can bring to the table when all is said and done and we sit down and figure out what this is going to look like and feel like after the fact? Is there any points to move forward? So can I bring anything to the table, or any tips that you can talk about, Laura, that I can jot down and say, Laura mentioned this? Or, okay. I mean, I think everybody's in the same boat, paddling down the same river.
Yeah.
And we're getting a ton of information, but no information is bad information.
Right. Fair enough. Good. Yeah. Travis, how about you? You're on mute. I'll unmute you. There you go.
I don't actually have a necessarily goal or idea in mind exactly. I'm more or less just here to hear what everyone else has to say and just kind of get a better idea of what's going on in the business aspect and around the province.
Okay, awesome. That's helpful. Great, thank you. And I know Derek said he doesn't have a mic. Chris, on the photography side, how about you? How's your world? What are you thinking? I know he's calling in. I'll unmute you. There you go.
I'm looking to see what businesses are doing so that I can figure out best way to market to them. That's basically it.
Okay. All right. Great, thank you. Dave?
I'm not driving yet, but can you hear me?
Yeah, sure can.
Okay. Yeah. Honestly, Laura, I've observed your growth over the years from a bit of a distance in the business, and I was fascinated by all of the progress and good things that you've been sharing with people, at least not just locally but nationally. And I thought there's something to be gained here by listening in, and also by meeting the other people who are attending. And I thought to even though the timing's not as good on my end, I want to be in the loop, and I want to learn what I can, and certainly respect what you've been doing for years, and just wanted to glean the good stuff and connect with others as well.
Awesome. Thanks, Dave. And Lisa, I know, Derek, you're on not having a mic. So Lisa, we'll wrap up with you and then I'm going to dive in.
Sure. Hi, Laura. Thanks, everyone. Good to be on the call today. I'm with the Atlantic Canada Aerospace Defense Association, and we represent about 170 industry members across the Atlantic region. A large part of our membership is manufacturing-based, high-tech industries. So we're really trying to, I mean, their world has been shaken in the perspective from, travel and ability to do the business development cycle. So really looking for some tips and best practices as to how to kind of continue that BD cycle from a virtual world and a virtual perspective, to really try to keep our businesses going and accelerating in this time.
Okay, awesome. Thanks, Lisa. That's super helpful. Okay, so with that, let's dive in. I just always find it's helpful to get a little bit of a sense, and then that way I can try to tailor it as best I can. And if there's any questions, certainly after the discussion, ping me offline, and I'm happy to share anything that I can with you to help you as we all navigate this very interesting time. So Krista's already done an intro. I'm not going to belabor some of the things that I have in here, but Zoom rules, and I know everybody's using video. If you're not speaking, put your audio on mute. If you do want to say something, just raise your hand or post it in the chat. But this is certainly intended to be interactive, so happy to answer questions as we go. So a few things that we want to cover today. We've already run through the introductions. We're going to talk about COVID-19 and the levels of impact by sector. So I'm going to run you through some analysis that we've done sort of broadly based on all of the research that's coming at us to try and really unpack where things are at on an industry level, so that you can hopefully apply it in terms of some of those opportunities and what may be coming down the pipeline as we get through the hump. We'll talk a little bit about pain points and opportunities within the key sectors. There's 4 things that you can do as a business: focus, identify, target, and prepare. I'm going to walk you through those. Again, we're trying to keep it super simple. This is some of the things that we're doing for recovery plans in other markets with companies and communities. And then we've kind of put together a little bit of a top 5 checklist just to kind of keep things actionable and tactical as you go forward from here. And we'll have some time for discussion at the end. So Krista's already mentioned a bit about what we do, but really we're a market research and strategy firm, and we specialize in high impact projects for communities and companies. So in other words, we really want to work with communities that want to grow and communities that want to drive economic opportunities. So we try and really focus on cluster development and new areas for communities that they can allow them to drive new opportunities for jobs and placement of students and that kind of thing. We work at the intersection of industry, government, and academia to drive economic growth. So we work a lot with government departments, companies, to be able to help them leverage government funding and help them close that funding, and then helping communities, companies, and institutions become more focused, resilient, and competitive. The thing for me that's very exciting about all the things that's happening with COVID, even though that seems like a bit of a crazy thing to say, is the fact that we are certainly having no choice but to focus. Both in our communities, we're seeing in our province that we can actually come together as a province and focus on our health. So let's channel that in terms of how can we be global leaders in some other areas, which we believe is truly possible. So that's a little bit about us. Some of our results, we've closed about 350 million in grants and new revenue for clients. 90% of our clients fully implement the strategies that we develop. Our clients say that we reduce time to market by about a year. 95% of our clients have reused us or referred us to others. And we have network partners in Canada, the US, and Europe, which we leverage to help with export potential. So the impact of COVID-19. So COVID-19 obviously has changed the landscape economically, locally, nationally, and globally. And with this rapidly changing situation, companies are facing unprecedented challenges in the immediate term. And the immediate term, we say, is basically now till reopening. The short term is basically over the next 12 months, and then even the long term beyond that. So we're going to talk through a bit about that. IBIS reports that approximately 91% of all industries are expected to be moderately or highly impacted, and it changes every day. And I know everybody's watching it all the time. Again, information overload. I'm sure everybody's feeling a sense of overwhelming sense of too much information. But the intensity is really determined based on your trade exposure, your supply chain exposure to trade, or exposure to business environment risks in the local market, certainly with some closures, accommodations. And we're going to talk about that in a minute, Jen, just in terms of what that looks like. And it's happening everywhere. But there's also, again, with the flip of that, looking at, global supply chains, there is a great opportunity here for us to reinvigorate some of the materials, raw materials, food supply, and other supply chains that we could actually really harness here in our local market and help to spur sectors that have maybe struggled for a little while. So there's definitely something that we can glean from this. So we've put together, and I'm going to do this one first. Like, this is a table that we've put together to be able to highlight sort of risk factors, and I'll explain this. So low risk that you're going to see is basically green. Low risk is industries that are expected to be impacted in the short term. So they have short-term repositioning requirements, but their employment may not be impacted in the immediate term. So they're not necessarily laying people off, but they're having a blip because, of course, everybody's having a blip. Medium risk is orange. So industries, and this is what we've developed, by the way. So we've kind of taken all the stuff that's happening and done the analysis and sort of come up with this sort of structure. So orange is more industries that are expected to have some employment loss with likely temporary layoff scenarios, some impact on cash flows, and short-term repositioning. So some immediate or short-term sort of implications, and then hopefully they can get through things from there. High risk is red. So industries that are expected to be highly impacted by short-term closures, loss of overall business operation, reduction in monthly year-over-year revenues of at least 15% and up to 100%. And so these are the categories. So we've broken it down in 3 categories and 3 time frames. And so because everything really is happening and changing so quickly right now, that you really need to be thinking about things in chunks of almost 30 days. What's happening in the next 30 days, what's happening in 60 days, what's happening in 90 days, so that you can kind of think through what can you do in the short term to keep your businesses going. What can you be doing from there to be able to help find the opportunities? And then what's your long-term game plan? And so based on looking at the situation today, there's only a few that are kind of in the green, meaning that, they've had very low impact, utilities, energy, although, NB Power and others, lots of businesses are not operating at full capacity. So their energy consumption is down. We're seeing a lot in oil and gas, but that's mining, quarrying, oil and gas. They're in the medium. They're certainly impacted right now because people are not driving, people are not actually in their businesses, so they're not consuming all of the oil and gas that they typically would. And so, but most are either in the medium category or in the high category. So you see here, retail, trade, accommodations and food service, arts, entertainment, and recreation are really in the high risk, probably for the next 24 months. And I know aerospace and defense, Lisa, you guys are, from the perspective of air travel and aerospace, it's going to take probably 2 years to rebuild that. I'm on the board for the Fredericton Airport. We're certainly watching it very closely and trying to see what we can do. And so what we need to do in our communities is find ways to support these red sectors for sure as we start to gradually reopen. And there's some things that I'll talk about a little bit in the session that will maybe give you some thoughts or at least some nuggets that you might want to build on. If you look at where the reason we have plus signs in some of these areas is these are areas that we are anticipating are actually going to grow. So for a couple of you that are wondering, okay, what's going to happen in industry and where might the opportunities be, Corinne, in terms of workforce or job placement, what might that look like? And I know Ignite Fredericton is actually looking at doing some deeper dive and analysis on workforce and what that looks like. So we'll keep you posted on that. But really the plus signs are areas that really could actually have a resurgence or growth through all of this. So agriculture, forestry, and fishing, you know, again, back to supply chain. There's an opportunity to really bolster our agricultural industry here locally and furthermore in other areas. So that can be a potential opportunity. Looking at mining, quarrying, and oil and gas, more specifically mining. You know, we do have precious metals and materials here in New Brunswick and in other areas, natural resources. There could be an opportunity to look at materials that we could use in the supply chain and in new product development that could actually have an increase. Construction with stimulus funding, we are expecting once we get over the hump over the next year, there'll likely be some type of a surgence in construction. And this all changes, by the way, on an ongoing basis. So this is not written in stone. This is a guide to get us thinking where things may go, knowing that this is very likely going to continue to change and evolve. But this is just based on, you know, let's think about these types of things because it's very practical in terms of what the impact could be. Manufacturing, we're anticipating and we're already seeing the manufacturing industry both here, but also throughout Canada, because so much has been manufactured in China over the last, you know, 2 decades, really. There's a real opportunity to bring some of that manufacturing back in to the Canadian market and to our local economy. So we're hopeful that manufacturing is going to see a boost. Wholesale trade may see some opportunities for growth with distribution centers. And if we diversify our supply chain, there could be some opportunities with that. Information and cultural industries, it's really more the IT sector, also already seeing a boom to apply IT to traditional industries. And so that's certainly one to watch. Real estate and rental leasing right now, you know, there's some situation, they're in the red right now in the sense that, you know, landlords are not having, there's some vacancy or there's people that are not able to pay their rent. But as we proceed to the next level, there may be an opportunity to repurpose some of those spaces and bring in other types of businesses. Professional and technical services are already seeing a boost. The educational system is certainly going to be transformed. We work a lot with universities and colleges in Canada and in the US, and they are retooling, repositioning. It's very possible on-campus learning is not going to happen by the fall, and they will be pushing it, particularly in larger institutions. University of Toronto, for example, they have some classes that accommodate 1,600 students. Well, they can't accommodate 1,600 students in one class. So they're obviously in a state of transition, but also a state of opportunity, because if they can be focused and transition some of those elements to online, they could open up opportunities in a global market, which could be very exciting if they can actually get through the hump. Healthcare, it's been said that every business is going to become a healthcare business. And so whatever lens you're looking at it and whatever industry you're in, looking at it from a health and safety perspective and trying to understand how you can incorporate that layer into your business will be quite important, really, for all industries and for all businesses. And so we do anticipate that that will be a layer that will be added as well. So I'm going to talk next about pain points and some potential opportunities. Any questions in terms of this for those that can see this on the screen? Does this make sense to you? Yes? Yeah, nodding. Good. Okay, excellent. I'm going to keep going. So turning challenge into opportunity. So if you look at these industries, you know, in terms of the main pain points and some of the things that we can do, and I won't belabor some of them because I'll try to make it more appropriate for those that are on the call. I've already mentioned agriculture. So again, looking to scale food production. How can you support local supply chains? I've already mentioned mining and construction. And again, I'm mindful of those that are on the call. And so I'll move along on those. I want to actually talk, I'm going to move to retail trade, and I want to go down here for a second to accommodations and food services, and then I'll go back to a couple of the others. So for the accommodation and food services, you know, in terms of food services, I know we don't have any food services on the line, but we're already seeing our restaurants who are trying to pivot. These are the folks that are in the red that may need some immediate support and are in the high risk area. But there's different things that are happening in terms of themes for weekday ordering, special delivery packages, unique offering, setting up recurring meal delivery services, preparing ready-made meals that can be delivered then frozen. There's a real shift now in the economy of merging and marrying our technical expertise with traditional industries. And so we're very fortunate in New Brunswick, and particularly in Fredericton, that we have a tremendous strength in IT. And what we can do, if you're not in the IT sector, if you're in accommodations, or if you're looking at other areas, finding a way to be able to leverage what's happening here. There's a lot of really great startups, and they're too trying to survive, because even though they're in the tech space, they're also trying to, they may not be fully to market, but they have an opportunity to be able to help develop new software platforms, or help develop new concepts that can speak to some of the needs that we may have right now as a result of COVID. And so, we certainly encourage there to be some sort of cross collaboration or cross promotion, or working with those that can actually help bring your businesses ahead in some of those technical adoptions that could be possible. In the accommodations, and again, we think about tourism and what's going to happen in our summer months, which is just before us. And, we may be in a bubble with PEI, which would be great. And so maybe there's some cross promotions or opportunities there that we can look at. So I wanted to highlight that, because I know some folks on the line in that area. I'm going to go back up here to manufacturing, and looking at, again, aerospace and defense. If we're looking at aerospace and defense industry in terms of what's happening, great time to be also driving new innovations for technology or technology adoption to some of those industry folks. So some manufacturers are struggling due to little demand for their products, and others are leveraging immediate term opportunities, which we're already seeing. They're over capacity and actually even hiring. So there is an opportunity to retool facilities to respond to the need for PPEs. Are there other products that need to be that are needed in healthcare in the short term and the medium term? And for users, are you currently offshoring your products? Can you source more locally? Can you partner with local manufacturers to be able to help them? So anything that can be done in those areas would be a great thing to do, both for your own business and also for your colleagues that are also running businesses and trying to move forward. From a wholesale trade perspective, wholesale trade companies that are relying on products from abroad are facing potential shortages. We're already seeing delays in transportation, which transportation and warehousing is next. But when you actually look at the timeline for shipping, some of those timelines are getting more stretched out. So we need to be thinking about that in terms of what you're doing or what you're accessing for your supply chain or your products and services. For wholesalers, what is needed for supply chain diversification and security, and how can local and regional economies support that? For retail trade, with the closure of non-essential businesses, retail industry, especially traditional bricks and mortar stores, will need to adjust in the short term and the long term. For retailers, what can you do to pivot? What's your 30-day plan? What are creative ways you can generate short-term cash flow? For consumers, think about where you shop and what you purchase. And the reality is, as we see these changes in supply chain and where we're actually getting our products manufactured, things are probably going to cost more. And so, it's really important to consider the fact that we may end up spending a little bit more to support local, but that's not a bad thing, because if that supports our economy, there's much more of a multiplier effect from an economic impact if we actually purchase from one another. Even if it's a little bit more cost, it will actually drive other employment opportunities and placements that we can have in our workforce if we're helping companies here thrive and survive. So it's really important to think about that. And hopefully the retail trade, which they're already starting, becomes more adept at online purchasing and their e-commerce capabilities, so that they can do that. Great opportunity for photography, for photographers. Chris, I'm thinking of you and of Dave. If the retail trade and others are trying to bolster their online and e-commerce, well, they're going to need some photography and they're going to need some other things. So that might be a great segue or window for you folks. Transportation and warehousing. The transportation sector seeing great decreases in activity, which of course has an implication also on oil and gas, because they're not driving as much. Although some may say that the online purchasing has certainly picked up as well. I know the gentleman that does deliveries in our neighborhood has said they've been busier than Christmas, and in their deliveries, of course, because it's really your only way of getting things. So there has been a bit of a dip. But we can expect to see some changes in that. And so what can we do as a community? we can look at having, distribution centers perhaps closer to home, or if there's types of companies that we're trying to attract as a province, could we have some of that supply chain located more closely to us so that we can manage both where it's coming from and the timeline and the delay for our supply chain. So these are other things that we can be looking at. Real estate and rental and leasing. So the number of real estate transactions are certainly decreasing right now as sellers are hesitant to open up their homes to potential buyers, just in terms of the home market. On the commercial market, it's also a little bit of a challenge in the short term because people are simply not occupying their space right now. But we are seeing a trend, again, US clients, God love the US. If they're nothing else, they're persistent. They're still closing deals, large deals with large tech companies that are actually going to be occupying spaces in different technology parks or different business parks in the US. Their transactions are actually continuing while they've slowed. They do not expect that that will slow forever. They do see that already shifting, which is encouraging because we're usually not far behind in terms of the economic catch up on that. So post-COVID, can landlords shift their focus for current rentals? What are some new and innovative ways to use spaces? For education services, I've mentioned education already. So educators are looking at how to move in-person classes to online channels. For technology companies, I believe the Learning Bar is participating. For you guys, certainly, are there opportunities for additional support on online platforms? Are there business opportunities with colleges or universities to help them to pivot, which could be a great opportunity for tech companies or online education platforms? For healthcare, so just a couple more, and then we're going to talk a little bit about the 4 things that you can focus on. So healthcare, as reopening begins, individuals may find ways to declare immunity status without compromising their privacy rights. But we do need to learn to live with this virus until that there is a vaccine, and we can't have everything stop and halt for the next 18 months while that occurs and while testing occurs. We're certainly closer than, and it's happening more rapidly than we've seen with other viruses or other issues. But it is something that we do need to be aware of, that we need to learn how to live with this and adjust our businesses accordingly so that we can continue to maintain and grow our businesses and our communities under new considerations. So in terms of from a healthcare perspective, I mentioned previously, all companies can become a healthcare, have some sort of a bent. Tech companies, they can mobilize digital health opportunities. The province has actually been looking at digital health opportunities for some time. So this is great news for our province in terms of things that we can do on the digital health side. For manufacturers to retool equipment to respond to healthcare needs like PPEs and others. And for retailers, perhaps there's service offerings specifically for hospitals. For arts, entertainment, and recreation, and specifically those that would be impacted for, tourism, many jurisdictions are hesitant to allow mass gatherings. So this is going to become a challenge for conferences and meetings, and we understand that. There is a movement now in terms of having some of those pieces go online. There's talk of bringing back drive-in theaters, online arts and crafts for parents and kids, subscription and membership models for online education platforms, promote to local markets post reopening to drive local tourism markets. Again, back to the collaboration, I know we're working with some groups in Kingston, and the St. Lawrence College, which is located there, they're working hand in hand with the art gallery and hand in hand with other tourism folks to bring that bent of digital into their world, and then also trying to find ways of how you can actually drive some monetary benefit to it as well. And not that we want to do that forever, because we want to have that in-person interaction, but it is something that we need to be doing so that we can manage this in the shorter term and over the next couple of years, what this is going to look like. I've already talked about accommodation and food services. So I'd like to move now into the 4 steps you can take. And so what we're doing with companies in the recovery is basically helping to focus, identify new markets, basically develop target lists, and prepare materials. So these are 4 simple steps that you can undertake. And if you have bandwidth within your organization, it's very simple for you to work on these yourselves. If you need additional support or help, there are programs that can help you depending on the sector that you're in, which is great. But ultimately, these are some things that you can do based on what you know today. And sometimes it's difficult to move ahead because we are living in a world of tremendous uncertainty. So this is about trying to take what you know and doing something about it. And so the first step is to focus your business. So, asking yourself, are you selling the right products and services to the right markets? there is an opportunity to identify new verticals for your products. And this applies whether you're in IT or manufacturing or really any industry. This is the perfect time to focus. And we've seen it with other, large companies and other times of recession. It's when Microsoft and Apple and all kinds of other big companies have come out with their next big thing, because they've had to focus to be able to tighten their resources. And as a result have actually, experienced exponential growth in other verticals, that because they became so focused in those areas. And so it's a real opportunity to look at that. You can also look at identifying new applications for your products and processes to help leverage short-term market opportunities. And so maybe there's service offerings that you have that you're already, demonstrating success, particularly 60 days ago, pre-COVID. But what could you be looking at to have new applications for those products? This is specifically around technical companies. If you're a technical company and you've got a software application that you're applying to X industry, perhaps there's new industries or new markets that could actually benefit from that. Now's the time to look at it. The other thing in the focus step is also looking at your pricing and your margins. And we're gonna actually talk about that in your 5 things to be able to look at. But the challenge with a lot of companies is that our margins are too small. And we need to make sure that we have appropriate profit margins to generate sufficient cash flow to be able to future-proof our businesses. And so this is the perfect opportunity to take a look at that in terms of how are you pricing? What are you pricing? Are you value-based pricing as opposed to just, pricing based on the goods and your markup, traditional markups? There's ways of actually trying to be able to derive greater value and looking at your pricing so that you can actually be not only targeting the right products in the right markets, but also perhaps there's an opportunity to increase how you're pricing. Not that you're going to gouge people, but it's an opportunity to try and really take a hard look at your margins to make sure that you're pricing it appropriately for the value that you're deriving, so that if you do build certain aspects within your business, that you have a potential to be able to increase your overall bottom line, not just your top line. So identifying new markets for your products. So you want to look at certain target markets that might be suitable for your immediate and short-term market opportunities. So, whether it's in the local market or the regional market or nationally or internationally, make a list of where you're actually getting your biggest uptake. If it is in the local market, maybe there's pockets within the local market or certain sectors like what we've been talking about that really could use your help, that may see a surge in some of the areas of growth that perhaps you weren't previously targeting, but maybe you have a specific service offering or target to them. So, we encourage you to take a look at that. The third step is then developing a list. And so this may seem very straightforward, but looking at a target list of clients that would be most suitable for your short-term market opportunities. And so, what is the profile of that client that you want to be able to target? And then basically just having a list. So developing a list seems very straightforward and very simple, but it's really about focusing in these 4 areas. And then lastly, preparing positioning materials for prospective clients. Everything that we're doing right now has a lens of COVID, and basically how you can take and position, here's what your service offerings were, 60 days ago, but then what's the lens and how are you responding to the needs for COVID, whether it's a health and safety issue, whether it's a market opportunity issue, making that direct linkage between what you're doing and how that can apply and solve a problem for someone, given what's happening with this global pandemic, is very useful. So we believe this is a very important step as you're speaking to clients or as you're positioning yourself. It's not enough just to be going to market with your traditional materials that you have. You really need to be adjusting them based on what is that new market opportunity for COVID? What is that need? How are you helping them to solve a problem? So those are kind of four steps that we've been undertaking and is helping folks become focused and really helping them get through their both the short-term pain points and also positioning for longer-term opportunities. So the last thing I wanted to highlight, and then we'll open it up for discussion, is a top 5 checklist. And so these are, again, very tactical, very practical, 5 things that you can be doing today. So a digital diagnostic, conducting a digital diagnostic, Are you properly set up for online and virtual business? And many of you probably already are, but it's a great opportunity to look at your website, look at your e-commerce, look at all these types of things. There's programs out there that are available. I know Krista and the Chamber have been doing an exceptional job in terms of identifying programs that are available, both federally and otherwise. The province, I think, has some as well. And so if you are in industries that don't traditionally qualify for some of the funding, to be able to look at beefing up your digital component, certainly you may, if there is a lens for if that has a technology bent, you may be able to qualify for that. I've already talked about your business model. Are you pricing your products at the right level to allow for sufficient gross profit margins? This is certainly something that is a great time to be looking at that. You want to check out your competitors. So do you know what your competitors are doing and how you're different, specifically in light of COVID? Short-term planning, preparing 30-day, 60-day, 90-day plan. I know that seems very oversimplified, and many of you probably already have this, but even just having 5 or 6 things that are, here's my focus for the next 30 days. Within that 30 days, here's what I'm doing this week. Here's what I'm doing next week. Here's what I'm doing the week after. Here's what I'm doing week 4. Breaking it down like that helps break it out into bite-sized pieces and not seem so overwhelming in terms of getting through some humps. And it also makes you have a sense of accomplishment, because then you can see that you actually are making probably more progress than you think you are from week to week. And then as we go forward from month to month. And so we really encourage folks to develop these plans, these short-term tactical, here's what I'm focused on during these periods of time, and then over the next 12 months. And then of course, the last is to think long-term. So after the COVID recovery, where do you want your business to be in 5 years? And what steps do you need to take to make that happen? Do you want to position your business or the folks that you're working with for longer term potential or exiting and succession planning, and weaving that into your short-term plans will really help you in the longer term of seeing what some of those opportunities might be, and helping to really position your organization, your membership, or your business to be able to really move forward with confidence that you've got the right boxes checked to position yourself for success. So again, top 5, conducting a digital diagnostic, review your business model, check out your competition, do your short-term planning in 30-day increments, and think longer term as you're working on all those pieces. So with that, I'm going to pause there and open it up for discussion. I do have some questions that I'd love to chat with you about, but I'd like to hear from folks now. If you have any questions, throw them out, and otherwise I'll throw some stuff at you. Comments or questions?
I threw a question down in the chat section, Laura.
Yep. I'm just opening it up now. So from an employment opportunity lens, do you foresee retail and food service industries rebounding without having the need to hire as many staff? For example, will some give up large physical space because they've discovered an economic benefit to owners and just a few staff for a few food truck or smaller physical space to promote the takeout and home experience? You know, it's anybody's guess. I mean, it's hard to say, right? In the short term, they're not going to be able to operate at 100% capacity. So they probably won't need the same level of workers. But I can say that the agricultural industry will, right? When you look at the farming communities and what we're trying to do for food production, that might be a great place to be able to look for workforce placements, because they will need it, because they're going to be growing in that area. Whereas, you know, retail, trade, and food services, it's going to be a changing landscape, because they're not allowed to have the same number of people in at the same time. They do need staff for other measures in terms of counting people at the door and making sure I mean, if any of us have gone out to Shoppers Drug Mart or to the grocery store, as you're going, you're waiting in line because you can only have so many people in at the same time. So I would suggest that certainly in the short term, they're not going to need as many workers, I would not imagine, as they have previously. And hopefully that will change, but they would not be ones in the short term or in the next 12 months for placements. I think there are other industries that could use it. And as I mentioned, agriculture, manufacturing and processing, like food processing, other manufacturing assembly lines, I think could be a great target for workforce placements, because they'll need it. So those two would be probably better targets, I would say, in the short term. Yeah. Any other questions or comments?
Laura, do you think when this is all said and done, and I think I already know the answer, because this is a global pandemic and kind of everybody's in the same boat, do you think it'll make the country, Canada, and then our province look at the amount of how do I say this? The amount of need that we need to look within our borders to help with kind of food supply chains, IT, infrastructure. Do you know what I mean? I think this is the first time where we've been like, everybody's in the same boat. So everybody's going, how do we take care of ourselves? Not to sound selfish, but do you know what I mean? Like when it comes to, when this is all done, will we be different when it comes to looking at how we function as a country?
Well, I don't think we have a choice because again, we simply won't have the luxury of accessing the same food supply and raw materials. And do we really want to take the chance? Like, I mean, now is a great opportunity to be able to help support our own sectors and our own industries. And, you know, I think it's very exciting because too much has gone out of the area for manufacturing and too much has gone out for food. And we've been talking about, you know, more sustainable food sourcing, and there's more and more movements that have been trying to do that. And unfortunately it hasn't had uptake as it should. You know, look at Levi Lawrence and the business that he was getting going, which is basically, you know, 2 years too soon, right? Because people weren't prepared to pay a little bit more or to look at that as kind of changing our habit. It's a cultural shift because you have to basically change our mindset and our expectations that, oh, I want to go get this and I want to be able to eat this kind of food all year long. Well, it's not the end of the world if you can't. And if we actually really want to support our farming community, and if we actually want to make sure that we're not in a pickle, if there is a pandemic and you can't eat, like what happens if things continue and you literally can't get the food in and you can't eat? Well, that's a problem. So we have no choice to be sustainable in that way. And I believe Sean Graham's government, and this is not a political comment, but I mean, I think that they were talking about that, you know, 10 years ago in terms of sustainability and trying to be able to look at supporting and, you know, using our own infrastructure and our own resources. And there's a lot of merit to that. And I think I don't think that we have a choice, and with any disruption and any challenge becomes a lot of good that will come from it because it will help industries and it will help us be more self-sustaining, I think.
Yeah, it's not selfish. I'm sorry.
No, you go ahead.
It's not selfish, really. If everybody is looking at their own smaller economies, it's of benefit to the world. I think that's a lesson that we need to take from this, is that if everybody doesn't have a sustainable economy, or if people don't have meaningful employment, we're in bigger trouble when something like this happens. So it's not selfish. It would strengthen the global economy.
It's strengthen the global economy. I agree, Corinne. I actually totally agree. And, you know, when we look at, so think about tourism, for example. So the tourism industry this summer in communities across globally, we're going to be wanting to, well, the only place that we can all go is New Brunswick, right? Unless they open up the borders and we go to PEI, and PEI's in our bubble because I don't want anybody else in my bubble because they're all a mess. So, you know, hopefully we have a little bubble with PEI, which would be great. Well, if we discover, like, how many of you knew how many waterfalls there were in New Brunswick until the pandemic? I didn't. I've lived here my whole life. You actually did, Corinne. Thanks. Corinne's like, I already knew that. No, but how many did, we didn't know that. Well, you know, I didn't know that. And I'm a hiker and I enjoy all that, but we're forced to. And so if you can actually, how many people say New Brunswick's a drive-through province? And, oh, you know what? You're coming this way, you should go to PEI. You should go to Nova Scotia. You should go do that. I'm guilty of it because I love those other areas as well. And they're beautiful and wonderful. But wouldn't it be extraordinary if all New Brunswickers could become an advocate of all the great things in New Brunswick, because we are forced to rediscover them. And then when the tourism season opens up again next year, then we will encourage people that we know, all as ambassadors, that, oh my gosh, you've got to go check this out. And this is a great little day trip. And if you want to do this. So, you know, everything happens for a reason, and we have to harness that and take the good from it, because 18 months from now, it could be really exciting times, even though it's bumpy right now. And even though there's a lot that everybody's working on and it's painful and it's, you know, it's tiring and there's a lot of stuff. when we get out the other side, we could be in a pretty neat place if we harness that opportunity and we don't balk it, and we try to find ways to support one another, and we try and find ways to support the businesses, because there is a lot of good here, and there's a lot of talent and smart people and all of that. So yes, let's hope that that's where it goes, because that's where we should go in Canada. And frankly, it will help strengthen the global market, because in Canada, and when you travel to Europe or to other places, they love Canadians and they love Canadian made things. And that's going to become even more important, because people will want to support other other products that are made in other countries aside from just China. And it's no disrespect to China. It's just now everybody realizes how much we rely on the ecosystem and how fragile that is, right? So Tanya, were you raising your hand? Sorry. Or are we just doing that? Okay, sorry. It's like an auction. If you raise your hand.
I was probably brushing my bangs away, to be fair.
Okay, yeah, sure. Okay, excellent. So, and I know Krista put a comment in here, given the supply chain costs, increased labor, and layered with the current appetite for local suppliers, do you think consumers will stick with it and do more than just talk with shop local and actually be willing to pay a bit more? And how long will that last? Well, again, I think it's a shift. I think we have to be prepared. It's going to cost probably a little bit more. And, you know, supporting local doesn't mean going to your local store and asking for a discount and to match an online price. It's about going to that store and supporting them and purchasing a product that they're offering, because they don't have the same buying power as some online retailers, and that's okay. So hopefully if we can all be prepared for that. And in Europe, for example, you go to Europe and things in Europe, well, it's more expensive, but the quality is very good, and people pay more because they recognize and appreciate that they're paying for quality. And so we do need to kind of encourage that sort of cultural shift to be able to really help support that direction. Any other comments, questions?
Laura, I'm just paused here for a moment. Listen, there's nothing like promoting value-based pricing. And that's something I've only learned of in the past couple of years. It does, when we do value-based pricing, I have learned that the margins are far better. It allows me the chance to breathe, to do better work, to choose clients that are of a like mindset. Just better quality goes out. That resonated with me. If we can sell people on the percentage of basically forwarding a percentage of their annual profits to us, if what we do brings in those profits, what a shift that was for me. And it's just nice to hear that said, and I wanted to bring that up.
Yeah, agreed. Thanks, Dave. Any other comments? Okay, so there's two quotes I want to leave you with. That's really what we wanted to chat about. I was going to challenge you with some of the questions or give you some homework, but I think we've covered it off. You all seem to have a pretty good handle about where you're at and what you're looking for. Hopefully this has given you a few things to noodle on and take away and think about in your businesses and for our community, as we're all trying to figure out what the next steps are. But these two quotes really resonate with me. So, it is the greatest of all mistakes to do nothing, because you can only do a little. Do what you can. And so with this, I mean, sometimes because there is so much uncertainty today, we think that you can't eat an elephant in one bite. So you can't actually start and change the world and change the process, but you know what? You can take one step at a time, and you can actually do some small things to make small progress. And then before you know it, you'll look back 30 days from now and think, wow, oh my goodness, I'm so glad I took those 10 steps, or I'm so glad I did those 10 things, because it's still putting me closer to my objective than where I was previously. And so sitting back and waiting until everything's perfect is, you'll wait forever, because it's never going to be perfect. It's never going to be back to the same as it was. And so the best thing that we can do today is work with what we know and do something. Do a little something today, because it will make a big difference 30 days from now and 60 days from now. And the second is, hope is not a feeling of certainty that everything ends well. Hope is just a feeling that life and work will have meaning. And so the best thing we can do for each other and for our community is to continue to believe that we can see this cultural shift, that we can, to the points in the conversation, that we can actually look for ways to really being okay with that value-based pricing, and to be able to support our community and our businesses in a way that is meaningful and that is sustainable. And if we can demonstrate that we can actually be leaders, even in terms of how we've been handling the COVID crisis within our province, and getting the cases down. And yes, there's been a couple of new cases recently, but that's going to happen, and that's inevitable because it's a virus. But if we can come together as a province and a community to do what we've been able to do over the last 45 days, imagine if we can actually channel and harness that into a thriving economy that really thinks more long-term in terms of what do we want to put back in our buckets, and what do we not want to put back in our buckets, and then helping to be able to move that agenda forward with the same level of dedication and unity that we've seen over the last 60 days. And working together to try and be leaders in this area, because frankly, New Brunswick is. It has nothing to do with luck. It has everything to do with leadership, and everything to do with people coming together. So let's channel that. So hope is not a feeling of certainty that everything ends well. It's a feeling that life and work will have meaning. And so let's find that meaning both in your businesses and day to day as we rebuild things as a result of the pandemic. And where can we go from here? And let's make some extraordinary things happen. So that's my presentation, folks. I really appreciate your time and appreciate the invitation from the Chamber. And again, hopefully you've got at least even a couple of tidbits to sort of think about and noodle on to help you in your respective work. If you have any questions, feel free to ping me offline, and certainly happy to discuss further.
I just want to say thank you so much, Laura. This was really great. That chart was so informative and just made everything make so much sense. So thank you very much for that. We really appreciate you hopping on the call. I just want to say thank you, everybody from the Fredericton Chamber. Thank you for reading our emails and our updates. And just to let everyone know, we do have a few events coming up next week. On Tuesday, we have a session on strategic planning. And on Wednesday, we have a virtual coffee chat with TELUS. So that'll be a nice catch up and kind of an easy one for everybody on a Wednesday morning. So thank you so much, and we'll see everybody soon. Thanks.
Thanks, guys. Have a great day.